Hello there, this is David from David Books and Comics, and today I want to show you some of my Lone Ranger collection. It's not some, it's the complete collection. All 18 novels of the Lone Ranger series, young adult Lone Ranger series, which first appeared back in 1936 in the early days of the Lone Ranger popularity. So this novel, The Lone Ranger, was written actually by Gaylord Du Bois, and even though it says Fran Stryker, the first edition of the novel actually has the original author's byline. And I'll show you a copy of it, a copy of the cover, and you'll notice the picture is exactly the same. The artist is signed, it's at the bottom here, Paul Lone. And but you'll notice that he's not wearing a mask, which in here you'll see is just like painted on. Anyway, so Gaylord Du Bois was born back in 1899 and he died in 1993. And he wrote this first novel. The subsequent novels were all written by a guy named Fran Stryker. That's Francis Hamilton Stryker. Now, Fran Stryker's association with the character began way back in 1932, and there is evidence that he actually created the character. And it was a combination of two people, really, James Jewell and Fran Stryker, while they were working at WXYZ radio station in Detroit, Michigan, along with George W. Trendle, who eventually gained the copyright ownership of the character. Stryker created the character, created the Lone Ranger and Tonto. The name, I believe, was created by a guy named James Jewell, who was the director of the radio show. So I'll show you the books as they come about, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Fran Stryker. So that's the first novel. And here is the copy of the second novel, and this one was written by Stryker. The Fran Stryker wrote hundreds of episodes of the Lone Ranger series, and he also wrote almost all the episodes of the Green Hornet series that was also created by a combination of Fran Stryker, James Jewell, and George W. Trendle. So that's number two. The number one, I'll put it aside. And then back in the 1980s, Pinnacle Books decided to reprint them. And this is actually number two, The Lone Ranger and the Mystery Ranch. Pinnacle, of course, being the men's action adventure publisher. And I believe this is the only Western they ever published. Their two most famous series was the Executioner series, of course, and the Destroyer series. All right, so that's number two. Number three in the Lone Ranger paperbacks was this, or hardcovers, is this one. And this is the Lone Ranger and the Gold Robbery. It's the original cover, also by Paul Lone, along with the Mystery Ranch. That was also by Paul Lone. And you can see there it had the adventure story for boys. They're all baseball stories written by or attributed to Zane Grey. Let's see the publication date. See, created by created by George W. Trendle, but subsequent evidence has revealed otherwise. So there you go. That's number three. Number 4 in the series, and this is the original, the hardcover original. This is The Lone Ranger and the Outlaw Stronghold, as by Fran Stryker. And as you can see, it has the tinted red tint on the text block. And just a beautiful cover. That's The Lone Ranger and the Outlaw Stronghold. The next novel is this one. This one is number 5 in the series. And this is The Lone Ranger and Tonto. And I'll give you a little background on the Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger, first, as I said, first appeared back in 1932. The adventures start, and it's been retold a few times in the movies, when a bunch of Texas Rangers ride out to catch a bandit and his gang, a bandit and his gang named Butch Cavendish. And as they come to a place called Bryant's Gap, trying to trap this Butch Cavendish person, they were guided by a guy named Collins. And when they came into Bryant's Gap, Collins had led them into an ambush. And in the ambush, Cavendish's gang simply shoots and kills all of the Texas Rangers who went after this villain, Butch Cavendish and his gang. And but unbeknownst to them, to the Cavendish gang, one of them survives, but just barely. On the scene pops up an indigenous man named Tonto, and he nurses back to health one of these Texas Rangers. And so the adventure begins. Once the Texas Ranger is nursed back to health, his goal is to catch Cavendish and bring him to justice, Cavendish and his gang, and bring them all to justice. And he does succeed in that. But then after that, he vows that he will commit his life to catching bad guys and criminals in the Old West. And so the adventure begins. The TV series began in 1949, and it starred two great actors, actually, Jay Silverheels, and a Mohawk native person from the Six Nations Reserve in Brantford, Ontario, that area of Brantford, Ontario. And a famous serial actor became really well known after he took the role of the Lone Ranger, a guy named Clayton Moore. They reprised the roles in 1956 and 1958 in two films, The Lone Ranger, which is an excellent film, by the way, an excellent Western, well worth watching, even for adults. And in 1958, there was The Lone Ranger and the Lost City of Gold. Also a good film, and not as good as the first one. Anyway, so this is number 5. We'll take that aside. And I'll show you number 6 is this novel. It's The Lone Ranger and the Haunted Gulch. And you can see the end papers by Paul Lone, and the image that you see on the cover of all of the books is also by Paul Lone. The publisher of this series was Grossett and Dunlap, famous for their publishing the Nancy Drews and the Hardy Boys series, along with what's his name, Appleton's, I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, so this is number 6. The next novel in the series is this one. This is number 7. This is The Lone Ranger Traps the Smugglers. And there you see the Zane Grey Boys books and papers. Oh, that's number 7. The Lone Ranger Traps the Smugglers. All of these novels are mystery novels, in essence. Western mystery novels. It's the best way to describe them. So this is number 8. This is Lone Ranger Rides Again by Fran Stryker. Now, and this one is not numbered. This is number 9. This is the Lone Ranger Rides North. Now, Fran Stryker, he was born in 1903 and died tragically in a car accident in Elma, New York on September the 4th, 1962. He was only 59. Very prolific writer. He wrote for the adventure strips of the Lone Ranger. He wrote these novels. He wrote also the BLBs, Big Little Books, featuring the Lone Ranger, almost all of them, including the 3 Green Hornet BLBs, Big Little Books. All right, so that's number 9. In here we have number 10. This is the Lone Ranger and the Silver Bullet. And there's all the books. This is an early edition. There's all the Lone Ranger books. All Grossett and Dunlap, 1948. So the Silver Bullet was his calling card. Whenever he wanted to drop and leave a calling card to let people know who he was, he would give them, hand them a bullet, all made of silver, called the Silver Bullet. All right, so that's the Lone Ranger and the Silver Bullet. The Lone Ranger Rides North actually features a story that introduces a character that became the mainstay of many of the radio episodes and the comic books, a guy named Dan Reed, who, if you know the origin of the Britt Reed and the Green Hornet, you'll know that Dan Reed is the grandfather, I believe, of Britt Reed, the Green Hornet. The next novel in the series is this one. This is number 11. And this is The Lone Ranger on Powderhorn Trail. Nice cover. It's almost like a mirror opposite of this one. All right. The next novel in the series is a beautiful cover. It's number 12 in the series. And has a faded spine. And there's the Paul Lone end papers. So this is number 12, Lone Ranger in Wild Horse Canyon. The next one in the series is this one. This is the Lone Ranger west of Maverick Pass. And if you look there, you'll notice the reorder number. It goes up to number 12. So this is number 13. This is the original, the hardcover original with the Paul Lone end papers. The next novel in the series is this one. And this is the Lone Ranger on Gunsight Mesa. And there you have Tonto and the Lone Ranger. Here he's dressed in his blue, the blue that became the mainstay look of the character in the later painted covers in the Dell comics and in the two color films and in the TV series. So that's the Lone Ranger on Gunsight Mesa, number 14. The next one in the series, and this is a facsimile cover. This is number 15. And this is the Lone Ranger on the Bitter Spring and the Bitter Spring Feud. That's a beautiful, nice, sharp cover, facsimile cover. All right. This one is the Lone Ranger and the Code of the West. This is number 16 in the series. And you can see, you look at the end papers, it's already different end papers. It's Ray Paul, the artist. So that's the Lone Ranger and the Code of the West, number 16 in the series. The next one in the series has a beautiful cover, and it's Trouble on the Santa Fe, as by Franz Stryker. And it shows the Lone Ranger galloping away with Tonto in the background. Beautiful cover. And the last one in the series, this is a facsimile cover. And this is the Lone Ranger on Red Butte Trail. Nice sharp image. All right, so that's the hardcovers. And I'll show you the other paperbacks in the series. This is the Lone Ranger and the Gold Robbery, and again it's by Pinnacle. Pinnacle Paperbacks. And the next one is the Lone Ranger and the Outlaw Stronghold, so number 3 and number 4 in the series. These came out in 1980, anticipating the release of the Legend of the Lone Ranger movie that came out in 1981. Starred Michael Horse as Tonto and Clinton Spilsbury as the Lone Ranger. And it featured Christopher Lloyd in an excellent performance as Butch Cavendish. So it is a film that's still well worth watching. The cinematography in the film is excellent. So if you want to enjoy a good film and good supporting cast, you well worth buying this, getting or watching the 1981 Legend of the Lone Ranger. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this presentation on one of my favorite characters, the books that I've collected for many years. And if you did, remember doing that thumbs up thing. Click on the thumbs up. Thanks everyone for your subscriptions. I appreciate all the subscriptions and the comments. And again, thanks everyone. Okay, bye.